Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Marche, the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guest and get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars, such as this one featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed with Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. Well, we are thrilled to bring you this educational presentation today. Attendees are muted, but we encourage you to ask questions using the chat box, and our presenter will answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. If you ask a question in the chat box and we don't have a chance to get to it, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. We'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event. Once again, we want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. Well, I'd love to introduce you to today's speaker. Debbie Elder is the nation's leader in motivating students to be peak performers. Her varied backgrounds includes running the disciplinary unit at the Calgary Young Offender Center as a therapeutic foster parent, a homeschooler, college planner, and after-school program director. She currently owns the Shady Oaks Primary School and loves to share her incredible knowledge in simple steps that can be implemented immediately. She has experience speaking to students, teachers, corporate America, entrepreneurs, and people who want to be successful at life. And we are so thrilled to have you back, Debbie. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my share and then let you take over here. So just a second. Let me make sure this is working. All right, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, let me get this started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Just gonna get us to where we want to start. Here we go. So, can you see my screen?
No, you go ahead and share.
Oh, hang on. I thought I did. Here we go.
If it's not working, I can always share my screen. Oh, here we go.
Here we go. All right, now we're ready. So welcome, everyone. As Marche said, my name is Debbie Elder, and I own an elementary school here in Richmond, Texas. Today, I'm excited to talk with you about conflict. I personally believe conflict is a really good thing. And now you're thinking that's crazy, but here on our campus, we learn so much through conflict. And it's a great opportunity for us to use that as teachable moments with our students, to really encourage them to sort of learn those skills here so that they don't have to worry about conflict in the workplace when they get older. So conflict still happens. People have strong opinions, but there's ways that we can use connection to allow us to resolve conflict, to have respect for others, to really hear what they're saying. And just because you validate what somebody's saying doesn't mean you necessarily agree with them. And I think sometimes that's where we run into some problems, that we validate, I hear what you're saying. It doesn't mean I agree with you. And there's ways that we're going to talk about to ensure that people can be heard and validated, but you don't lose your sense of integrity with what you believe in, which I believe is very important for all of us. So when we talk about connection, we're going to talk about different ways to recognize others. And this is not rocket science, but it's also not your mother's ease, your mother's speak, the way you're normally used to talking. And so we're going to go over some of these, and I'd like you to be able to start incorporating these both in your personal life and in your professional life, because when we feel connected to others, we have a lot higher level of empathy. We have a lot more grace that we can offer. We tend to put things in perspective a lot quicker. And we really, I tell my husband all the time, nobody's out there doing things to you. We all do things for ourselves. So when that person cuts you off in traffic, they're not even thinking about you. They're trying to figure out the best way to get to wherever it is they're going to, and you are just collateral damage. Now, does that excuse their action? Absolutely not. But to get all upset and worked up about something where the other person really didn't do it on purpose wastes a lot of energy that you can use for a much higher good. So based on that, let's get started. So it all begins with clarity. You've really got to be able to identify your why. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Because when you know that, you can respond as opposed to react. And I know for me, when I understand what I'm doing, it really allows me to be open to different methodologies, different paths, different processes to get to the end result. If I'm focused just on the process and not the end result, I can get very tunnel vision and miss opportunities to improve or to expedite or to ensure that I'm bringing the best forward. So really, for me, when I get clear, as I'm asking you to do, about what it is you want to accomplish, you can allow others to help you. You can delegate. One of the things that we're going to be doing in the new year is talking about ways to delegate and expand your reach through other people. And if we get focused on the process, it's very difficult to do that. But I know from my own experience, both leading my teachers and working as a coach with clients, that's not easy for everyone to let go of their process. They really want everyone to do things the way they do things. I know for me, I learned so much by watching other people's processes. And sometimes I'm like, that's not going to work for me. But often I'll find nuggets of what they do that I can bring into my life. And I know as much as COVID has been a very difficult time for all of us, I've learned a lot because we had to make adjustments, as I'm sure all of you did. And some of those adjustments were terrible. And the minute we didn't have to do those anymore, we stopped. But some of them really shone a light on a new way of doing something that we've continued. We've decided to bring that practice or that methodology into our regular routine, and we've used it moving forward. If we were so conflict elusive and not wanting to learn about it and only sort of being stuck in our own way, we wouldn't have taken the nuggets that we can now use to expand and do better at serving our families and our students. So clearly outline your expectations. So it's very difficult when you're working with others. If you can't identify what it is you want, there's going to be conflict because people are guessing and making assumptions. And my father told me what that word meant when I was very young. And I was like, "Oh, Dad." But, we really have to be careful with assumptions. And I think we make them a lot. And if we're not dialed in and clear that that is not good for us, if we don't take the time to investigate, to ask questions, to really understand what somebody else is thinking and doing, we can get into a lot of hot water, and we can also cause ourselves a lot of stress and pain unnecessarily, perhaps. Getting really clear on your non-negotiables. And by that, I mean, there's certain things that I'm unwilling, I am rigid on, I'm not willing to move, but they're very, very few. And I know here on my campus, the first 2 weeks of school, we don't do any academics. We save that time to get really clear on expectations for both the students and the teachers, so that the students know what to expect from their teachers and the teachers know what to expect from their students. And at the end of that, the understanding is, I know that you know that you know that I know that you know the rules. So if you break a rule, it's on purpose and there will be consequences. And that has done so much to allow us to have a much smoother year of operation, because there's no room for misbehaviors. We've really clearly established. Now, they don't always perform and be perfect children, but the expectations are clearly stated. And I think in every business, that's really, really important, to state expectations and just know what your non-negotiables are, and to be consistent, which isn't always easy, I understand. But I know for us, we spend 30 minutes each morning in a staff meeting, just reiterating. And sometimes it's talking about things that have come up, and just going back to the basics. What do we believe in? What's important to us? And weighing every decision against that level of expectation, and knowing that if it can pass that test, right? If it can pass the spit test, if it runs through our 6 pillars of what we believe in, then we can move in that direction. And it really helps to keep us grounded, and it allows us to be consistent, which is very, very important. So finding clarity eliminates options and aligns with our values, which is something that sometimes I think we just jump into things. We don't take time. And when you really know what you stand for, it really, although it seems like it's counterintuitive, it does help with conflict. So we'll explore that a little bit more.
Now, we had a question here
Perfect.
about, you know, certain people have different non-negotiables, and some of the conflict sometimes comes in when, what do you do when someone wants to violate some of those non-negotiables, and that's the source of the conflict?
So if we think about your circle of influence, so we think of many circles, the circle that's very dear and near to you. So if it's in your workplace, it's the people you work closest with, maybe it's your superiors. Those people in those situations deserve for you to do what's called a win-win resolution. As that circle expands, it's not that important. What somebody out here thinks of you really shouldn't matter to you. But there's different ways to resolve conflict. There's lose-lose, where neither of us get anything out of it. There's win-lose, I get something, you get nothing. Then there's compromise, which we kind of both get sort of maybe what we want. And then there's win-win. And if you spend time and you listen and you're willing to put the effort in, you can always come up with a win-win solution. It takes time. And so you have to be willing to invest in the person. And you will find that even with strong non-negotiables that are on different spectrums, when you understand why the other person has that non-negotiable, again, it gets back to what I said in the beginning. I might not agree with you, but I can respect your willingness and your need to have that non-negotiable. And I'm a smart woman. People listening to this are smart also. We can come up with a workaround. We can figure out a way to honor you as I want to be honored, and to work in this project or this firm together to a common goal. And it also helps to really know yourself. Self-awareness is super important, so that if I know in a collaborative situation what skills I bring to the table, then I can identify how I can be helpful. That also reduces the need or the opportunity for conflict, because we kind of declare our lanes, if you will. So if my job is to be the writer or the editor, then that's what I'm going to focus on. And I'm going to wait for you to hand me your material so I can, it just allows us to really understand our role, which does help to reduce conflict as we move forward. So I hope that helps with their question. Good. Oh, not advancing. Hang on. There we go. So when we look at taking moments frame by frame and really, there's all this talk about being mindful and staying in the present. Well, because that's what works. And if we get so wrapped up in what we're doing and forget this, it can cause a lot of issues. So if you take every moment to look for opportunities of success, if you can remember to stay in a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, and if those terms are new to you, a growth mindset really has the idea that I can't do this yet, but I have resources. I can go to YouTube. I can learn from a superior. I can read about it. I can take a class. I can learn how to do this, as opposed to a fixed mindset that believes what I have right now is all I get. And there's no room for growth, and it just is what it is, and suck it up, buttercup, it's not going to improve. And that really can affect conflict, because, maybe there's someone you don't really like at work yet, right? And your job is to find something about that person that's likable, to find something about that person that is great. And again, maybe you don't like them, but you can respect them. I worked many, many years ago at a young offender center, and I ran the disciplinary unit. So the boys that I worked with were between the ages of 12 and 18. And for me to do my job, they didn't need to like me, but they did need to respect me, because it was very difficult to work with these unruly young men if I didn't have their respect. And the things that they respected in me was that they knew I was fair. And for them in their lives that they had lived up until that time, life wasn't very fair. And my job was to protect them and keep them safe and treat them equitably and fairly, and to help to boost their self-esteem and work with them in all different areas. But the core of it was respect. And I think it's the same in a workplace, that we need to respect each other so that we can get the job done. At the end of the day, you don't need to hang out with the people you work with, but you do need to respect them, or conflict is inevitable. And I think that's a problem, and it's not very productive, right? If there's a lot of conflict, productivity starts to really slow down, and it's not enjoyable going to work if all you're doing is arguing and having conflict. So it behooves us to really get very clear on who we are, and then to figure out a way to make the workforce, or the workplace rather, someplace that you are very enjoy going to, that you look forward to. I know for me, I love what I do, and I jump out of bed every morning. I can't wait to come here, but that's a mindset. Some days are rough. And so knowing that there's that solid belief that I really am making a difference, and these students need me, and my teachers respect me and enjoy my leadership, allows that to happen. If you can see what every individual is doing in the moment and can comment on that and recognize it and say it out loud in detail. So I have a term that I call drive-by praisings. So, it's kind of like an attaboy, like, that was awesome, you did great. They don't really land. What you really want to do when you're trying to make connection with someone is to be very specific in what you see, so that it can land with that person, so that you are making sure that you're recognizing them in a way that they can relate to, that's not your opinion, right? So I can say to somebody, oh, I love that blouse. And the person might be thinking in their head, really? I put this on because I had no other clean clothes. I hate this color on me. It doesn't land but if instead you speak to, wow, that is a really deep color of blue and the texture looks very soft. You can't argue with that. It is blue and the texture is soft. And so the person can go, yeah, but it's my worst shirt, but thank you for noticing. It's a very different way to approach sharing information. So there's a great movie, you might have seen it, called The Horse Whisperer, with Scarlett Johansson and Robert Redford star in this movie. Scarlett plays a young woman, probably 10 or 12 years old, who has been in a terrible, horrific horse riding accident with her friend. Her friend was killed. She's now walking with a limp, requires a cane. Her mother has tried everything. They brought in psychologists and therapists and doctors to help her. And she's really struggling emotionally with what has happened, as you can imagine. And so out of desperation, her mother brings in the horse whisperer, and hoping that maybe working with the horses, somehow this can help her daughter. So Scarlett is out at the barn feeding the horses, and Robert Redford comes in and says, come on, let's go for a ride. So she limps over, gets her cane, walks out to his old truck, and he throws her the keys and tells her to get in. And so she hops in, and he says, okay, I want you to drive. You're just going to put the key in here. D is for drive, R is for reverse. There's the brake, there's the gas pedal. Let's go. And she looks at him and she goes, but I can't. He goes, yeah, you can, just turn the key on. So she turns it on, and they start driving, and it's very very jumpy and bumpy at the beginning, as you can imagine. We all did that. And then she kind of gets her groove, and she starts going, and he says to her, listen, I'm just gonna put my hat down for a minute, just take a little nap, just go to the road ends, you're gonna turn left, and just keep going, you're doing great. And she looks at him and she says, but I can't. He says, but you are. And that's why I wanted to share this story with you, because oftentimes we really hinder ourselves by thinking that we can't do something. We have that fixed mindset. And I really want to encourage you, when you're dealing with conflict, to remember that you can, and that you are, and that you are equipped. And we're going to talk about different ways to equip you to deal with the conflict that you're handling in the workplace. So when you look at different people that you might be working with, it's like we have a portfolio. If you think of an artist, what do they put in their portfolio? They put their best work, right? What they're really proud of, what they want to show others. So every member of your team is carrying a portfolio of how they think about themselves. And we can help them experience who they really are by pointing out through recognitions. And I know in some cases we've had students who have shown up on our campus and their portfolio tells them that they're not very smart, or they're not good, or they're bad children, or they misbehave. And that's what they've been carrying around because that's what they believe about who they are. And sometimes our job when we work with others is to slide out the things that aren't true about their self-belief and put into their portfolio what is true. And the way you do that is by catching them and articulating what you see and what you experience with them, and then saying that back to them in a way that they can start to incorporate into their self-awareness and their self-being. So we're looking at irrefutable evidence, and what irrefutable evidence is, and this is what sort of changes something from being an attaboy praising to truly a recognition, or something that lands and is valid. And everyone resonates with this, even those crazy teenagers I worked with who know everything and don't want to believe anything and like to roll their eyes. When you call out what they're doing, you can't argue with that. It's not my opinion. It's irrefutable evidence. This is what I see. It overrides any feelings of inadequacy or negative self-talk. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that term self-talk, you're all doing it now. In your head, you're going, gosh, this is a great presentation. I am so glad I took the time to watch. She is fantastic. Where did they find her? I'm just kidding. But it's what goes into your head and how you see the world. And sometimes it's not good. Sometimes we get into those dark places, and it's an opportunity to override some of those by looking. And you can do this with yourself too. You don't need to have others point it out to you, but you're just presenting the truth to the other person. You're simply acknowledging what you see, and it's irrefutable. They can't argue with you. And eventually over time, that's how connection is made, even with the person you're really struggling to make a connection with. And it's very simple. It can be something as easy as a smile that you share with somebody. It's a good morning. It's taking the time to listen to the answer after, how are you? And not simply getting the one word and keep walking, right? It's really stopping and investing. And I think one of the things that you can do to reduce the amount of conflict you have is to invest in those that you work with, to really take the time to listen. And I know in other presentations I've done, we've talked about different personality styles, and some of those are very different and very opposing, but they all have some really good nuggets. And if you can find what that goodness is, then you can really latch onto that and continue to allow that to grow so that those connections become very strong. And I think that, I know here, oftentimes with myself and my staff, if something goes crazy, my first thought is not to assume that my staff has done anything wrong. I know them. I trust them. I believe in them. And so when something doesn't seem right or doesn't resonate with me, or something blows out of proportion, my goal is to go and investigate before I react or respond. It's to go find out what happened, to hear their perspective, to understand, no, are they perfect? Absolutely not. They're human, just like we are. And they make mistakes, but because we have such a strong connection and feeling of team, that the first response is never to accuse. It's always to find out, so what were you thinking? What happened here? How can I help you? Is there something going on outside of the workplace that may be impacting? How can we work to overcome some challenges? And once you know that you're not going to be judged, the other thing that happens, which is really great when you get your conflict under control, is people start to take risks, and people start to know that they're not going to be judged. So they'll try new things. They don't always work, but if there's a feeling of growth in the company, that's when the great things happen, right? Look at Apple and Google and all the things that they've developed because the people that work there had the confidence and had the support to think outside the box, literally, and come up with new ideas. And I think if there's no judgment, if people have a sense of safety, then creativity expands exponentially, which is super important for growth. So when we look at misbehavior, and this is a really great screen. You might want to take a picture of this one and hold on to it, because what's on the left is if you feel annoyed or irritated, the other person needs attention. If you feel powerless, out of control, the other person is requiring power in that moment. If you feel hurt, they're revengeful. So that's something that's developed over time. And if you feel discouraged trying to help them, they have feelings of inadequacy. So let's break these down a little bit more. So if somebody has a need for attention, what can you do to offset your feelings of being annoyed and irritated? You can recognize that need and meet the need in a way that fits your needs and your desires. So here on campus, for example, when I'm leading a class and teaching, I stay in front of my students. And by that, I don't mean I'm the sage at the front of the stage. I mean, I'm catching their greatness and I'm articulating it so that they don't need to get my attention by being bad. They don't need to misbehave for me to acknowledge them. They are getting acknowledged and recognized for doing the right thing. You can do the same in the workplace. You can acknowledge your coworkers, your superiors, the people that you lead for doing the right thing with irrefutable evidence. You can't forget that piece. When you're dealing with power, again, delegation, figuring out what people's strengths are, giving them time to explore that and to really determine what they're good at. What do they bring to the team? What are their superpowers, right? We've done lots of exercises helping others to determine what their superpowers are. Because when I hire, as I'm sure you do, I want to bring together a group of people where no one's redundant, right? I'm looking for, yes, we all have similar jobs, but what do you bring to the table that nobody else sitting at the table has? Because that really reduces conflict because everybody knows what their lane is. And there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of self-awareness that allows them to confidently step into a situation and go, hey, let me tell you, this is my area of expertise. And let me tell you how I would handle this situation. And when there's a willingness to put the ego aside and to really focus on that end goal, which is why there's clarity, I know I can easily put my ego aside when that goal is bigger than anything else in the room. And I think that also can reduce a lot of conflict. When you feel hurt, that's because revenge is happening, and revenge can be avoided if you pay attention to attention and power. The fourth area, and this is a very difficult place to come back. When I was working at the jail, I dealt with a lot of young men who were very much had feelings of inadequacy. Their life up until that point didn't work very well. And everything they had done had led them to a secure facility where they were incarcerated. So helping them to get over that feeling of inadequacy. And what that feels like is, it doesn't matter what I do, it's going to be wrong anyways, so why try? So if you're working in the workplace with somebody like that, that can be very frustrating, and you feel that discouragement and helplessness. And I think the goal to not get there is to pay attention to attention and power. So it's good to know that there's only 4 reasons people misbehave. And so you can easily dissect what it is the other person needs. And if you give enough people what they want, you will always get what you need. And so your goal is to be like a detective to figure out what those things are. This summer, I worked with a group of students, and we went through Robert Cialdini's work on ethical influence, which, if you haven't read that book or studied what he does, I really recommend it. And it's about really getting what you want without being without being deceitful or manipulative, and maintaining your integrity. And there's ways to do that. It's all scientific backed, and it's really a good read. So I highly recommend that for anyone who's looking for some nighttime reading. Magical recognition. So the first way to recognize someone else, and there's 4 of them, and this is the first, the easiest, is just to watch, to observe, and then describe what you see. For me, documentation helps. If you are supervising others, it's a great way when you have your one-on-one time, or you're doing a staff review, to have specific examples that back up what you want to say. So I'm big on documentation. I have a school, as I mentioned, so I'm talking to parents. It's very different for the administration or a teacher to say, yes, Johnny's doing very well, than to say, here's what we've observed over the last month, and have documentation to back it up. It just, again, irrefutable evidence, not my opinion. Here's what we're seeing that this employee is producing or not producing, right? But when you give an active recognition, you simply describe, you're acknowledging what you're seeing, and the person gets the opportunity to make the decision if that's a good or a bad thing. And that's where the key is. Again, it's not your opinion. So let me give you an example. As Marche mentioned, I homeschooled my daughters. And I was upstairs one day putting some things away, and I walked downstairs. Both my daughters are seated at the kitchen table. And I said, wow, you guys are really working. I just acknowledged what they were doing. They both stopped, put their pencil down, turned to me and said, thanks, Mom. So what had to happen there? What had to go through their mind? They had to hear what I said. They had to determine on their particular scale, was that a good thing or a bad thing? Oh, that was a really good thing. She's right. I am working. I'm awesome. I'm working. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. And then they thanked me. And that's what you want, right? You want others to be able to be cued from your words through their self-talk to be able to congratulate themselves. So an active recognition is a great place to start. Next, we get into an experiential recognition where you see a behavior and you connect it back to a character trait. We use this on our campus at the end of every day. We do a compliment circle. And what that looks like is the students have to be aware of the greatness in others because they don't know who they're going to be next to at the end of the day, what direction the circle is going to go to. So they have to have a recognition ready basically for everyone in their class, so they don't get caught off guard, because that's embarrassing. And it's really embarrassing for the person next to you not to have a recognition to give you. So they don't want to do that to their friends. So it could look something like this. Marche, today I noticed when we spoke before the webinar that you were really wanting to help me to prepare for my trip to Arizona. And you gave me some really good ideas. And what that tells me about you is that you're a really good friend and you're kind and you're willing to go out of the way to help other people. That's very different than thanks for the tips, right? And so it's, again, identifying the behavior and then wrapping it into a character trait. What that tells me about you is. So today I noticed, what did you notice? So you're taking the acknowledgement piece that we just discussed in the last slide, you're adding a behavior quality to it. These are great. I'm going to challenge you as you're listening to this to start using them. Maybe you start with a couple a day and build up, and very quickly, this becomes the way you talk. You can't help it. You just become someone who is very, very good. It's like learning a second language at speaking this recognition.
By the way, Debbie, we did not plan that. And that was just our conversation before the webinar. I will tell you, just as a recipient, that felt awesome.
Well, good.
I was just like a surprise. It was a surprise too. So it was like, oh, thank you. And that's really nice. And wow, it helps my self-talk too, to realize, oh, that's, that's a quality that she sees that fits into that kind of person. So that's, maybe like a little case study there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next, we have a creative recognition, and that's making a very clear request. So sometimes those people that have very different non-negotiables than us, or think differently than us, or you just don't like, I'm not asking you to like everybody, but we're trying to work on conflict so that it doesn't happen. So sometimes you need to be very creative in noticing that they're working in the right direction. So maybe one of your employees isn't quite where you need them to be yet, right? But with that growth mindset, you hired them, you believe in them. You've got to notice the baby steps along the way. You've got to notice them moving in the right direction. Because if you wait for the end result, in this particular case, they may never meet that mark. There's students I've worked with over the years that if I waited for them to be good before I said anything, I'd still be waiting. Right? You've got to help them, going back to their portfolio we mentioned earlier, you've got to help them to change what they feel about themselves, what their inner beliefs is, to ensure that they can hear this. And our job when you're working with someone who's difficult is to help them with this creative recognition, to acknowledge even just the smallest things that are moving them in the right direction can really make a difference. So the other thing that is helpful is you can also say to somebody, I noticed that you could have, but you didn't come in to work late today. You dressed according to our dress code. You could have, and all the things that they didn't do is also another way to recognize somebody, right? I know with us and our students, we can say things like, you're really angry, and I see that. And you could stomp out of here right now. You could hit me, and you're not doing any of those things. You're keeping your body very still. So it's acknowledging, because I'm going to tell you, even children just because you don't say it doesn't mean they're not thinking it, right? We all know that. So being able to acknowledge what somebody's not doing is also as effective. So here I have a question for you. What does it take to sharpen a pencil? And this is really to hone in on all of the actions and all of the opportunities we have to recognize behavior that we just leave it sitting on the table, right? You know, they say, don't ever leave money sitting on the table. We do it. We leave opportunities to recognize our coworkers all the time. So what does it take to sharpen a pencil? Well, the sharpeners that I have at my school don't have just one hole like this picture. They have 6 or 7. So for example, if I use my students as an example, they've got to realize their pencil needs to be sharpened. There's number 1. They've got to find the right hole. They've got to turn the crank 5 times. They've got to do it quietly. They've got to get permission. They've got to come back to their desk. There's so many places there where I can acknowledge them doing the right thing that, again, adds to that self-esteem, adds to their feeling, allows them to take pride in what they do. You can do the same in your office. So what are all the opportunities that you're missing right now to recognize those that you work with? Again, to build that connection so that there's a buffer of grace when things don't go the way they should. So here's some strategies I want to talk about to resolve conflict. So look familiar? Yeah. So there's that idea. And here you can see when you're looking at these 2 individuals that they're not thinking on the same page. She looks upset, the lady on the left, and the little girl is not really sure what's going on. And I think that's where that communication comes in. That's where that ability to really clarify and to ask questions that help you get to the source of what the issue is. So this is a cool exercise that I want you to do as homework. So when you think of conflict resolution, I often would start my seminars asking people to come up, and this is how I would lay it out. I want you to grab the hand of the person you're next to. I want you to stand facing each other. And the goal here is to bring their hand to your hip as many times as you can. And so repeatedly, and I've done this in 4 different countries, it doesn't matter. Repeatedly, it becomes like a power struggle, right? And you'll come by and you'll say, so how many times did you get Marche's hand to your hip? And I'm like, oh, I got it there twice. And she got mine there 3 times. That girl is strong, right? And then you'll always find, or I always did, you'll find at least one couple in the room who's smarter than the average bear, and they will work together, collaborate, and they will pull back and forth really fast. And they'll have like, oh, we got it 24 times. So sometimes in conflict, we get into that idea, again, nobody does anything to you. They do things for themselves. So if this is a game and you're trying to win, it would make sense to collaborate and not be competitive. So just something to keep in mind. It's a great way to open up a conversation about conflict resolution. So number 1, don't wait. Don't do this ostrich move. If something's happening, conflict rarely is going to disappear on its own. And often, if you leave it to disappear on its own, if you leave it to just peter out, there's residual feelings that get left unheard and unresolved that only grow and spiral upward, right? So we've all worked with someone who's passive aggressive. How you doing? Oh, I'm fine. No, you're not. Your body's telling me you're anything but fine. So take the time to find out what's really going on, because pushing this stuff under the rug is easy in the moment. But if you truly, like I talked about earlier, if you truly want to get to that win-win, it takes an investment of your time, and it's always worth it. So address the issues immediately. But in order to do that, you've got to know who you are. You've got to know what's important to you, and you've got to be able to have a reason to address these. So, know thyself is very, very important when you step into the act of resolving conflict. So you want to navigate conflict fairly. So we use what's called a restorative justice circle that allows individuals to feel heard, both the person who feels victimized and the perpetrator, to have an opportunity to really get their reasonings out for what's gone on, right? And we have very strong and strict rules about how these circles operate. And it really allows everyone to be heard. There's also an impartial third person involved, because we don't always hear what we're saying the way it's intended to be. And texting, we all know, we've all lived through that, where you've gotten a text from somebody, you're like, what is their problem, right? Well, that was not their intention. That's just kind of how it came across. Or maybe you misread it. maybe you're not all in the best headspace right now, right? And so realizing that there is so many opinions and thoughts and feelings that can really muddle what's done in communication if communication is not clear. So some rules: no hurtful words, no mean words, no manipulative behaviors, controlling behaviors, or controlling words. And then you can really sit down and get to the meat of it and work together to come up with a solution. One thing that I like to think about when I'm resolving conflict with somebody is we're on this side of the desk and the problem's over there. That's the enemy. We're going to figure out together how we don't have to go down this path again. And again, I'm not suggesting that you deal every conflict at this level of investigation, but I think if it's starting to build, if you're starting to see it, these are the steps to take to eradicate that conflict so you can move forward. And again, you don't have to love everybody you work with, but you do have to get along with them. Brainstorm solutions. And everybody knows when you brainstorm, you don't judge the solutions. Really cool ideas come out of these brainstorming sessions. Be willing to be very flexible, to be adaptable, to take half of somebody's idea and put it with the other half of somebody's idea. And together you come up with an idea that's brilliant, that really allows everyone to shine and move forward in a way that they feel productive and a contributing member of the project or the office or the company that they're working for. And don't be afraid to bring somebody in to have, maybe you need to have all of your team go through these skills. Maybe you need to have an opportunity to have some training around how to do this. You know, if this is not something that you've been doing your entire life or that you feel comfortable with, you know, for me, a smart woman knows what she doesn't know, and I know what I don't know, and I'm very willing to get help from experts in those areas. And I think that's just as important as knowing what you do know, is understanding what you don't know. So if this is new to you, if these are things that you've never really thought about before, reach out in your community and find someone who can come in and walk you through some of these processes so that they can be clean and efficient, and people's feelings don't need to get hurt. We're all adults. So done in a way that's respectful can allow that sense of respect, and also really recognizing the growth and the greatness in others to shine through. Seek first to understand, and these are words directly from Stephen Covey, who passed recently. But, you know, a lot of times, think about it, even with your spouses or someone who's significant to you, when you have that clash going on, we just want to respond right away. We don't want to listen and try to feel and understand what's really going on with them. And a lot of times, if you will take the time to do that, you will have your own aha moment and go, I never looked at it that way. That is a totally different perspective. Thank you for sharing that with me. Now, again, I don't have to agree with your perspective. I think it's wackadoodle, but it gives me a chance to at least understand the lens that you're looking through. So now we can come up with a solution that allows us, and maybe it gives me an opportunity because I've listened and heard you, to help you maybe see what you see a little bit more like I see it, or for me to help understand how you see it the way you do. And it opens up an opportunity for more conversation and to really have a discussion, a truly a discussion where you are back and forth, and truly, again, your problem is on the other side of the table, and together you're really knowing the difference, as it says here, between hearing and listening. I can hear you all day long. There's background noise. How many of us can work with the music going on in the background, or the cubicles over there making a lot of noise, and still get our stuff done? I can hear it, but I'm not listening. When I listen, I'm actively listening. And that means I'm putting down distractions. I've put my phone away. I'm looking at you. We know in communication, only 7% of what we communicate is our words. 38% is our tone, a voice that we use. 55% is our body language. Well, if I'm only hearing you, I'm missing the body language piece, the biggest part. If I've got to listen, I've got to look at you. I've got to pay attention. I've got to watch what your body's saying in addition to what your words are telling me. And that really allows you to understand where they're coming from. And again, you may not agree with where they're coming from, but at least you've got some common ground to start at, to start moving forward to resolution. And lastly, you've got to come into this with a solution mindset. We have a saying here, no problems, only solutions. And I remember a parent said to me years ago, really, Debbie, that's a little polyandry. I mean, come on. And I went, no, I stand by that. That is what I believe. That is my mantra, because I decide if something is a problem or not. And if I term it to be a problem, then I'm going to find a solution. Some things may be problematic to others, but they don't bother me. Therefore, I don't have to worry about coming up with a solution. But again, going back to circling back, clarity is the number one thing, because I get to decide if something is a problem in my world to me. So it helps your staff to attain what they want. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, if we see conflict as an opportunity for growth, oh my goodness, get your emotions out of it, right? If you're truly focused on getting the product to market, then your ego will listen to somebody who might have a better idea than you. And because you really want what's best. I have no problem taking ideas from my staff, because at the end of the day, it's not about my ideas. It's about the best idea. It's about the best way to teach these students that we serve. It's about having the best widget that you're producing, right? You just want to make sure that you're allowing those that you've hired for very good reason to have a voice. And if you have no choice and have no voice, then you lose so much. Simon Sinek talks about the importance when you're in a meeting to, as the leader, to speak last. Because if I come in and say, okay, guys, team, I got this great idea. Blah, 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 what do you guys think? They're like, well, she's the boss. We think boss lady has a great idea. But if instead I say, we have this problem, we have this conflict, I need a solution, tell me your ideas, and I listen with no emotion, just listen. Then at the very end, I can circle back and pick out what I think is the best ideas, and then assert this is the direction we're going in. You're not going to get your people to think for you, which is really what we want, so that you're getting some of that brain power, as much as that brain power as you can get, if you don't give them opportunity to speak. If you come in and tell them what's going to happen, you're going to have conflict. So I'm going to stop here and see if there's any other questions that have come up or any comments from the chat, and take care of those.
Well, we do have a couple questions here. This is a really great one to talk about. As a manager, what are some ideas about how to bring up an uncomfortable topic with a direct report? Say, for example, that they have failed on some projects.
So I think I mentioned earlier about the importance of documentation. I think that's really important. I think it's also important to go back to our ostrich and not wait. If behaviors are only going to continue unless they're addressed. And if you're not clear about what you need, then the person doesn't know they're not doing what you want, right? So for me, when an employee is not doing what they need, the first person I look at is the one I see in the mirror. What have I done to create this situation? Have I not been clear? Have I let things slide that now I don't want to let things slide and have ballooned into other issues? Have I allowed them to show up late? And has that now affected how the other team members are showing up to work? Have I relaxed on some of my expectations and now it's coming back to bite me because I wasn't clear in the beginning, or I got lazy? Like how, because I can't even get my granddaughter to eat peas if she doesn't want to, right? She's going to just spit them back at me. So I've known from a very long time ago that I have to be the source of change. So when you're addressing these difficult situations, again, earlier is always best, always in private, right? We praise in public, but we address difficult situations in private. If it's something that's very difficult or controversial, or in any way could be something that could become contentious, I will often have my assistant in the room with me, just so that there's a second person there that heard what I said, which is really important. And I think, now with the labor laws the way they are, you just can't fire people. You've got to have reason, and you've got to make sure you've addressed these things as they've happened. And really, if you are clear on what you're trying to affect and you stand in your integrity, that's your job. And our job is to lead. So if the person's going down the wrong path, you have an obligation to set them right. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing your job. And I know for me, that makes those difficult conversations, doesn't make them easier, but it gives me the momentum and the ability to step in and have them, because I know that's my job. I hope that helps. But I think that having confidence that what you believe in, and also, I hire coachable people. That's discussed at the very first interview. If you're not coachable, I can't work with you, because my job, I feel, is to grow you to be the best person you can, not just in the classroom, but in every aspect. And if you're not coachable, if you think you know it all and, all that in a bag of chips, well, you're probably not a good place to work then, because we're always growing and learning. And that's the people I want to surround myself with.
And so speaking about setting expectations, a question came in about, can you describe a little more about those first 2 weeks at your school? Can you give some specific examples of how you set expectations and routines?
I will, and I can. And one of the things that's very interesting is before school starts, the staff have a meeting and I have them write a letter to themselves, as I mentioned, outlining what they want their school year to look like in as much detail as they can, because that gives them the parameters that they can then share with the students. It's not rocket science going to school, right? So we like the kids to tell us what they think the expectations should be. And we validate their ideas by writing them down. And then we process them as a group. So they, in effect, come up with the school rules. And it's very rare that we have to lead them to a rule that they haven't come up with themselves. Then we get very creative and the kids will come up with skits and we'll videotape them where they are teaching the rules to each other. And so if there's 5 rules, for example, in the classroom, they'll divide into 5 groups and there'll be a skit about each rule and why it's important. And so they internalize these because 1, they've had a say in what they are. 2, they've acted them out. So it's very, very clear at the end of these 2 weeks that we're all on the same page. And that has served us incredibly well for the last 8 years. They still stray, of course, but now it's like a head nod, or it might be something as simple as, what's going on? Like they self-correct, which is what you really want to get to, where they know that, oh yeah, I have to sit out for a few minutes and just sort of do a release and focus because I'm being crazy on the playground, or I just hit somebody with a ball. I got to go get them an ice pack. They know what to do. There's a lot of pride that comes from that. People can really grow and really force themselves to be their best selves when they're in that mindset. If they wait to be told what to do, if your employees are trained that they can't do anything on their own, they have to wait to be given permission, you lose so much creativity and you yourself become someone who doesn't get anything done because all you're doing is telling other people what to do. That's just not good at all, right? So for most people, when they start with this type of thinking, it's hard because they've never had to be so clear about expectations, and breaking it down so that you can teach it to someone else requires some effort and some thought, but it's always, always worthwhile and pays huge dividends. Strongly suggested.
We have a couple more questions here and then we're going to have to close. I know we could probably go on for another hour or so, but I do know you're a busy woman. You need to get back to your students and your parents. Here's a question. What if you're not a leader in your company? What if you're just one of the coworkers? How do you foster good conflict resolution when you don't necessarily have the authority to lead?
All right. I love that question. And you don't need permission from anyone to be a leader. Just because you have a title doesn't mean you're a leader. And because you don't have a title doesn't mean you're not a leader. So, I think that I've been in I consider myself a leader. Even when I was an employee at the jail, I was very much a leader, and I led by example and I led by inquiry. I had lots of questions. I'm a questioner. I'll walk into a situation like, why do you do it this way? And sometimes they can tell me, and other times they're like, I have no idea. And I'm like, well, maybe we should consider some other ways. And that got me noticed very young in my career and allowed me to move up the ladder, if you will, very, very quickly, because I cared enough to pay attention. And I think I never, and I'm sure the person asking this question isn't that either. I was never someone to go in, punch a clock, check the box, went to work, and then go home. I always was in it to improve the situation, to improve myself, and to improve those that I worked with. That was always my goal, those 3. And I think you can lead from any position in a corporate ladder. And I really encourage the person who's asking this question to take active leadership steps, to read about it, to learn about it, but you absolutely do not need to be in a leadership role to be a leader.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
So what's the best way to handle if someone is absolutely against what you have set out as far as expectations and are not budging?
That's when you have to decide to separate, right? Not every conflict can be resolved in a way that allows the two to stay together. You can still be civil, you can still be respectful, but you can also realize that, again, it goes back to those non-negotiables. So if I had someone walk in and apply for a job here who wanted to do worksheets with the students, that's a non-negotiable with me. That's not what we do here. So they are not a good fit. Again, sorry, it goes back to clarity, but I have to know that about what I'm trying to do to pick out where the possible conflicts are going to happen, right? And I think when I hire, I'm very, very, very clear on expectations, and they have to sit and listen to me talk about my vision, my mission, my goals, my methodologies, and I'm watching them the whole time I'm talking. And if it doesn't align, we're just not a good fit, because if I hire someone who doesn't align, we're just looking for conflict. And so again, it just knowing, and if you're in a position where the person is no longer, people change, no longer a fit, it's time to either see, are they ready to swing back in line, or is it time to release them, because they're miserable too, right? I think we got to remember that if someone is that diabolically opposed to what you're trying to do, you need to release them so they can go do what they do. You just can't do that here.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie, for your thoughts and insights. And we want to thank the organizations that have made this webinar possible today. I will remind our viewers that you need to look for an email soon for a link to the replay of this event. And you're welcome to share that replay with your friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a great fit of a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming. We will see you at another webinar soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.